Reconstituting the World, Sunday, April 5th. In the words of poet Adrian Rich, from which the title of my reflections this morning is taken, my heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. I have to cast my lot with those who, age after age, perversely, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world. One more time. My heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. I have to cast my lot with those who, age after age, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world. At first blush, this short poem, which is included in the readings in the back of our hymnal, seems to be about two different things. It seems even to be about two opposing things. On one hand, there is this element of grief. My heart is moved by all I cannot save. And on the other hand, there is this call to action and service. Reconstitute, repair, reconstruct, reassemble the broken pieces of the world. So this sermon this morning is about those two parts. It's about grieving and repairing. And I want to playfully propose that these two things aren't actually in conflict with each other. In fact, they may not even be two things. They may be the same thing. Let me talk about grief first. I've been sent, and I've been seen, and I've been forwarded, and I've seen posted lots and lots and lots of writing about grief. These articles, they are left and right. They're coming out left and right with all sorts of different thoughts about grieving. And I just want to begin, as I talk about grief, I just want to begin by affirming that every single person I know is experiencing loss right now and has experienced some amount of grieving over those losses. I saw one little online post the other day that said, I think dismissively, our grandfathers were sent to fight the Nazis. All you're being asked to do is sit on the couch. And I would say, beware of short little trite sayings. Beware of them like everything else you'd find on the internet. They may not be true, or helpful, or edifying. Because we're all going through some sort of loss, and many of us are facing complex, interconnected, intersecting losses simultaneously. And these are real. My 7-year-old daughter is missing being able to play with her friends, and she's missing the big field trip that she was supposed to take this week. And that's real. Teens in our church are missing prom, graduation, those last hurrahs of high school, and that's real too. This weekend would have been the Final Four in basketball, and whole rosters of college students are missing that peak, that climax, that apex of their athletic lives that they worked so hard for. And that's real too. All of it is real. One article on grief affirmed, quote, "It's not wallowing or self-centered to grieve the loss of things like weddings, proms, graduations, sports seasons, parties, religious observance, funerals, togetherness, support, connection. These things are all an extension of individual values like family, friends, intimacy, parenting, spirituality, career, and community. So they are connected to our higher purpose fundamentally." That seemed true to me. Early this coming summer, Anne and I are celebrating our 10th anniversary. And Anne had booked us this nice vacation. It was nicer than anything we've done in years in our family. And each week it seems more and more likely that this trip is not going to happen, and there is grief over that. Grief is not competitive. One person's grief does not lessen another person's. Nobody is in competition to see who has the most grief. And while I do think that there is value in being aware and becoming more and more aware of one's own privilege, one's own advantages, no one is immune from grief. It's like that old song by one of my favorite bands from high school, REM. Everybody hurts. Someone else's grief and struggle does not invalidate or lessen our own. And our own does not make the suffering of others any less real either. The key is to allow our own sense of loss to make us more compassionate to one another. This is the lesson of the famous story in Buddhism, the story of Kisagatami. Kisagatami, according to the story, is a young woman, married, who has had her first child, and this child in its infancy dies. And Kisagatami is racked with grief. In fact, so racked with grief that she carries the child through the village, trying to consult with all of the doctors and all of the holy spiritual leaders in the community. Cannot someone bring the magic makers, can't someone bring my child back to life? All of the wise elders, the doctors, the priests in the village tell her no, there's nothing they can do, but they suggest that she go and consult with Buddha. If there is anyone with that power, it is Buddha. So Kisagatami goes to see the Buddha and beseeches the Buddha, please bring my child back to life. And Buddha says, I will do this for you. But first you need to bring me a mustard seed. The mustard seed must come from the garden of a home in the village, a home that has never known death. So Kisagatami sets out, knocks on the first door and asks for a mustard seed. And the woman who answers the door invites Kisagatami in and tells her that she is mourning the death of her grandmother. Kisagatami goes to the next house and asks for a mustard seed. They welcome her in, and Kisagatami learns that this family is grieving the loss of a parent. The next house, an uncle. The next house, a cousin. And on and on. Finally, Kisagatami, according to the story, goes, buries her child, and follows the Buddha. It is a story about connecting in our losses. My heart is moved by all I cannot save. Then there is the other part of the poem. The second part of that poem by Adrian Rich. I have to cast my lot with those who, age after age, perversely, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world. This part of the poem seems to call us to important work, immense work, the work of reconstituting, repairing, and reassembling the world. It's a pretty large task. On the large scale, on the immense scale, I've also been seeing people who respond to this crisis that we are in and see a vision of what is needed for a better world. Shouldn't paid sick leave be a requirement for every person who works? Isn't health care a human right? Shouldn't the people who work the checkout registers and stock the shelves of the grocery store be paid not only a living wage, but a dignified wage? I could go on and on. God help us. God help us if this does not give us the will for systemic change. There's a poem It's been circulating around. It talks about systemic change and how we get there. It's a poem that's gone viral, if you will, and it's a poem that actually a handful of members of the church have sent to me in the last week. It's a poem by Kitty O'Meara. Kitty O'Meara is a retired teacher who lives in Madison, Wisconsin with her husband and her 5 rescue dogs. And her poem that has garnered so much attention begins this way. And the people stayed home and read books and listened and rested and exercised and made art and played games and learned new ways of being and were still and listened more deeply. Some meditated, some prayed, some danced, some met their shadows, and the people began to think differently. And the poem ends, and when the danger passed and the people joined together again, they grieved their losses and made new choices and dreamed new images and created new ways to live and heal the earth fully as they had been healed. I think Kitty O'Meara's poem really speaks to a segment of our society, a segment of our congregation, us who are being asked to heal and to reconstitute their own lives, to heal and to reassemble their own lives in a new way in this time. And I think it speaks to all of us who can imagine a world transformed. I want to take a very broad, very inclusive, an extremely broad and extremely inclusive view of what constitutes reconstituting the world. Our members who are doctors and nurses and healthcare workers, who are going in every day to care for patients, they are reconstituting the world. They are repairing the world. And the world needs to be changed for them. The 2.5 million farm workers in America who go out into the fields every day to bring us grains and vegetables and fruits from the orchard. All of that nourishment that reconstitutes our body, those farm workers are reconstituting the world every single day, and the world needs to be changed for them. Those in our congregation who work for Harris Teeter and go in every day to hold the fabric of our society together. So that's what I think the folks at Harris Teeter are doing for us right now. They're holding the fabric of our society together. They are reconstituting the world, and the world needs to be reconstituted for them. Those of us who have been thrust into the role of crisis educators of our children. And if you have children at home, it's been said you are not a homeschooler now. You are a crisis educator. Caring for children is reconstituting the world. The ones among us who check on our neighbors and plant gardens and sew masks and make music, they're reconstituting the world too. And here's the other thing. I don't think grieving and repairing, grieving and reassembling, grieving and reconstituting are two different, separate things. I think they're all mixed up together and jumbled together because there's no way for them not to be. My heart grieves for all the loss, and we are, all of us, in our own extraordinary ways, despite having no extraordinary powers, reconstituting the world, piece by piece, day by day, one act of compassion after the next, all our mustard seeds added together. I love you. I'm with you. Shalom.